Well, we always say retirement is a journey, one that you shouldn't have to navigate solo. So that is why every week here on The Right Path to Retirement, we turn to financial advisor Jimmy Lynn, certified financial planner and the founder of Right Path Wealth Management right here in Las Vegas. Always, we are about planning on this show, and a new year, I think, is the perfect time to work on your planning. So I want to start out today talking about arguably one of the most important things to plan for in your retirement, and that is taxes. If you look at people in retirement and their sources of income, it's usually from these 5 places, and each of them is taxed differently. You've got your IRA or your 401k, you've got your Roth IRA or 401k, you've got your brokerage account, your annuity, and your Social Security. So, Jimmy, to keep taxes at a minimum, are you looking at each of these accounts to calculate how much to take from each one? What's this process like when you're sitting down with a client ready to create that tax plan for them?
Well, Casey, you know I love talking about taxes, as sick as that sounds. But that's really kind of the differentiator of why people seek us out. You know, we meet a lot of people that have advisors during those accumulation years where all you're really worrying about is investments. But once they kind of shift to retirement and they have to start thinking about income, how are they going to receive those paychecks, and how are taxes going to play into it, that's a whole nother ball of wax where oftentimes we see, not always, but oftentimes we see that people's existing advisors either are not knowledgeable about that or are not allowed to talk about that from a compliance standpoint. So that's when people kind of start looking at that phase 2 of their life advisor. So this is what we love to talk about. And we absolutely have to consider taxes as part of how we start taking out money from our accounts. That's a written income plan. So you need a written income plan in retirement to know how you're going to start recreating those paychecks in retirement. And that distribution strategy of which accounts to take out from does in large part get impacted by the taxation of those accounts. So we always talk about setting up buckets of money in retirement. And so there's something called asset allocation, which is, you know, where to put your assets as far as high risk and high reward versus low risk and maybe low reward. But there's another thing called tax location, which is where do you put your assets based on taxation? And a lot of times, you know, we look at Roth IRAs that can increase over time tax-free, and we always want to kind of try to put our highest appreciating assets in there, and things that appreciate less maybe in a tax-deferred account. So those are a lot of things that we look at to understand, you know, what type of risk do we want to take in each account, and then how do we want to start taking that money out? Because ultimately the goal is to pay less taxes either in your lifetime, your surviving spouse's lifetime, or your kid's lifetime, or your heirs. Because if you don't do that, the only entity that wins is the IRS.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about RMDs for a minute, Jimmy, because a lot of folks are surprised to learn that the IRS actually requires you to start taking money out of your IRA or your 401k once you hit a certain age, whether you need that cash or not. They make you do it. RMDs can really throw a wrench into your tax plan. So, Jimmy, how do these required minimum distributions make things more complicated, and what strategies are out there to help prevent somebody from being bumped into a higher tax bracket because of an RMD?
Yeah, those RMDs are the trickiest thing to plan for, because what a lot of retirees do, and I've seen this a lot recently, is once they get into retirement, they still have maybe a decade before they're actually being forced to take that money out, especially with the new rules. If you were born 1960 or after, you don't have to take that money out until age 75. So that could be 10 or 15 years into retirement before they force you to take that money out. And so a lot of people like to try to keep their income as low as possible, maybe in the 12% tax bracket, because, you know, why do you want to pay more in taxes? But the problem with that is you're kind of just kicking the can down the curb, because if you have a large tax deferred account, say in a 401k or a 403b or a TSP, and you just allow that to continue to grow in value and take that money out at age 75 when it's required, then what happens is you're just taking a larger amount out. And, you know, many people expect that taxes might be higher in 10 or 15 years. And we know taxes are going to be higher if you pass away and your surviving spouse is filing taxes at a single status. That's called the widow's tax penalty. And we also know that taxes are going to increase likely for your kids if you pass it on to them. So being able to kind of manage your RMDs in a more custom fashion could be advantageous for people. We like to look at trying to convert money when your income is lower and do it over a 10 or 15 year period. So when those RMDs hit, it's not as impactful, because if you don't manage your RMDs, it essentially creates higher ordinary income for you, which increases your tax rate. But it's a domino effect, because then your capital gains could be higher, your tax rate there. You might have Medicare premiums called IRMA. And then, like we said before, there's the widows and kiddos tax penalty, which is higher taxes on a surviving spouse or for your kids. So we look at it all the time. Roth conversions are a very powerful tool. Also, if you're charitably inclined, there's something called QCDs, or qualified charitable distributions. So Casey, you know that every situation is different. So we encourage people, if they think they're in a situation where they might have a tax bomb on their hands, give us a call. You know, we can do that complimentary phone consultation, see if we can give some actionable advice. Our number is 702-744-8344. And I do have those 5 slots available this week.
All right, Jimmy. So we've broken down how taxes play into retirement planning. And while taxes are one piece of the puzzle, market volatility is another big concern for retirees. And in fact, CBS Mornings followed some couples who are preparing to retire recently. And after a 20% market pullback in the spring, they revisited Chu and Alicia Gomez in Boston. Take a listen.
I feel like I'm on a roller coaster. You just hope that if we're going to be on the downturn now, will we be on the upturn when we decide to retire?
So the Gomez's, Jimmy, they are 57 and 59, and they still want growth, but do they have to be on this market roller coaster at this point in their life? Talk to us about your thoughts on this situation, Jimmy.
Well, that clip sounds like they need a plan. You know, I heard the word hope, and I never like to hear hope as part of a solid retirement plan. And so I would say for the Gomez's, depending on their situation, obviously, we don't know all the numbers, but I would say that if they're at a point where they're nearing retirement, they're starting to think about these things, they have to shift their mindset, which is really difficult for people, you know, because for a 30 or 40 year period during your working years, you're just thinking about grow your money. But when you're a few years from retirement, you have to start creating a plan. And that plan really has to focus on income. How am I going to start creating that income stream in retirement? Because when I retire, those paychecks are going to stop. And I don't want my vacations, my hobbies, and my lifestyle to be dictated by a market drop. And so creating these buckets of money and understanding that we have near-term money as well as long-term money, it allows us to kind of have more clarity on our entire financial picture. We have a plan in place, and then you can just get the confidence, start spending. So that's what I would say is you don't have to be on this roller coaster, or at least you don't have to let the roller coaster scare you. Because if you have buckets where we know that our roller coaster money, that's money we're going to use 10, 15 years from now. Well, we can sustain those ups and downs, but just having a plan in place, because there's a lot of tools that you can utilize to manage this. You know, there's things like index annuities, there's things like structured notes that we love to use, but overall you need a plan. You don't want to just guess at it. And if we can do that, then I think that, you know, they can put themselves in a better mindset.
Well, yeah, that's kind of my next question for you, because nobody wants to feel like their future is on a roller coaster ride. So what are some strategies that you recommend for folks nearing retirement who want to keep growing their investments, but they don't want to risk everything that they've ever worked for?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you want to have diversification. So if we see a 20% drop, ideally we would have been in a situation where sometimes you could take advantage of that. You know, that's where structured notes come into play, where if the market drops, you could potentially get upside growth there. We also have annuities in place where we know that if we have that 20% drop, we will not lose a dime in those accounts. And so if you start creating these buckets, then we can have those accounts that could potentially have that 20% drop, because I know that I'm not touching that money for 10 years. And history tells us that if you allow your money that's in the market to have enough uninterrupted time, that typically it's going to grow better than most assets. So you have to create those buckets. And then at that point, you're not worried about a 20% pullback. I mean, nobody likes that. It's not ideal. But what we don't want to do is have any type of 20% pullback prevent you from, again, having your lifestyle, enjoying those retirement years, especially those first 10 years of retirement, where that's when you're strong and healthy. We want to make sure you take advantage of that. And again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it starts with a plan.
It sure does. So if today's market swings have you riding the roller coaster, let's set up some time for you and Jimmy to chat and see if he can help you steady the track. It all starts with you dialing 702-744-8344 to set up some time for that initial conversation with Jimmy to talk about what your specific situation is, what your needs are, what your wants are, and how the Right Path team can best help you move forward. 702-744-8344. Remember, there is no obligation. There is no fee for this meeting. This is just a conversation with Jimmy, so I highly encourage you to take advantage. 702-744-8344 or online at rightpathwm.com. That is going to do it for us this week. We will be back next week, same time, same place, with more great insight from certified financial planner Jimmy Lynn here on the Right Path to Retirement. Take care.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Right Path Wealth Management. Right Path Wealth Management is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth, LLC, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Right Path Wealth Management are not subject to investment advisory requirements. Investing involves risk, including potential loss of principal. Any reference to the protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing carrier. This radio podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decision, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Right Path Wealth Management is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Right Path Wealth Management.
Market Guard is a firm that provides investment signals as well as portfolio allocation recommendations, wide variety of model portfolios. Market Guard does not offer advice or enter into fiduciary relationships.